reverb might be killing your mix. The reality is that putting reverb on too early in the mixing process clouds our judgment because it just fills in all these spaces that we need to be paying attention to. So by holding off on putting on reverb and delays and other effects like that until after we've gotten all of our levels set, all of our EQ and compression dialed in, then we can make better decisions. Up until that point, we can know that we're starting with a solid foundation, then just use reverb and other effects to enhance that mix. This can be a little intimidating because reverb helps make things feel a little more polished, a little bit more finalized, but if you do it too early, it's going to hold you back in the long run, I promise. So today we're jumping in and we're actually going to start putting some reverb on in our song. If you haven't been following along, this is a 6-step series to a pro mix. We're going through the 6 steps that all professional mixes have and how to do them specifically inside Logic. If you don't already have it, be sure to grab the 6-step checklist to a pro mix from the link in the description below. That way you can quickly reference back to it anytime you're working on a mix in the future. You don't have to keep coming back to these video series. So, okay, let's go and jump into Logic and take a look at our song and figure out what we want to dial in wave effect. So let's just listen to it a little bit here, and I'm going to tell you what I'm listening for and what I think this mix calls for, but try to note it yourself and see what you think you would do in this mix as well.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away, you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the thick of it. And now you're saying you're proud, yeah, you're saying you're proud, all getting sick of it, yeah.
So to me, the main things that I think I want is a little more extension in the drums, a little bit more depth to them, make them feel like they're in a bigger space. That would be first. The second would be to put the guitars into kind of a realistic feeling room, something small. I don't want to cloud up these guitars, but I want to create a little bit of space around them. The third would be just a little bit of space around the vocal to make it feel a little bit more epic and make it take up a little bit more space in the mix. So let's jump in and start with these drums here. And the first way I like to do this is actually just triggered from the snare top. We're going to send off from here, go to a new bus here. We'll just go to bus 1. And we're using buses because they allow us to send over to that effect, so we can send multiple tracks over to that effect. We're not using that here, but we'll use it in just a minute. So we can send multiple tracks to one reverb, for example, and then we can also process that additionally. So if you want to put distortion or compression or EQ that effect, we can do that on that channel. And it protects the static mix because this channel, our original channel, the level isn't affected at all as it might be if you put a reverb or an effect directly on it. So it keeps your static mix as it is, and then we can just blend in effects with it. So let's go ahead and find that bus. In this view, we can find that track over here. We can hit create track, and that will pop it over by our snare. I can title this snare verb. And then on here, what I want to do is just add a reverb. So we're just going to go down to reverb. Let's do space designer here. And here I'm just looking for something fairly short. So something like a short snare room. I know that there's a couple of those built in here. So we're going to go to small spaces, rooms. Let's see, something around 3.3 seconds is good. Yeah, they have a 0.4 snare chamber. They have a wide and small. Let's try the snare chamber first and just see if we like the sound of that. So we're going to listen to the drums here. And I'm going to send from this snare just a full signal. If I take this send off. So this is off, put it back on. This is what that sounds like here. Just the reverb. It's actually not a bad snare sound. If I mute it here, it immediately just kind of gets a little bit wider and a little bit darker sounding. This is kind of a dark to mid-rangey snare sound or reverb sound. So I like that. Let's actually just try one other though in the context of the drums. Let's try that 0.3 room that we were looking at earlier. Let's try, yeah, this wooden chamber here. In solo. This one's a little bit brighter. I don't know if I like it quite as much. Let's go to one more. I like this wide and small. I know I've used that in other mixes. Wide and small. Let's listen to this one with the drums. I think I might like that snare chamber best. So let's go back to that snare chamber. Again, take it away. It just extends that snare just a little bit, helps it take up a little bit more space, and in the context of the mix.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names.
Now, when I'm dialing in my effects, what I like to do is bring them all the way down and then just mix them up until I hear them just a little bit, and then I'll scale it back just a little bit.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. And you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just.
I have a pretty healthy mix of this, but I think it kind of just blends in with the drum sound, so I'm okay with that. Okay, the next thing I want to do is a little trick from CLA, from Chris Lord Algae. That's just a really cool trick. We're going to send reverb from all of our non-direct sources, so from our overheads, our snare bottom, and from our room track here. So I'm going to go down here to this bottom bus and send from there. We'll just go to bus 2. I'm going to send a full signal from each of these, but we could tailor it later. We'll go over here to find that bus. I'm going to go ahead and title this Drum Verb. And this is going to give us just a general drum reverb sound. We'll hit Create Track, so it moves it over to here. And then I'm actually going to pull it to be down outside of this stack. And then on this, we're just going to go, I'm going to use the Space Designer again. And I want to find a room that's somewhere around 1 full second, 1 to 2 seconds. So we're going to go medium spaces here. And let's try this nice room to start and just see if we like the sound of that. So go up to the drums, we'll solo those. Take it away. Initially, I like the sound of it all off the bat. Let's try one other preset just for the sake of it here. Let's try percussion room. It's starting to feel a little bit long to me for this mix. Let's try something a little bit shorter. That's pretty cool. But I think I like that last one just a little bit better. So let's go back to that. It was the nice room, 1.4 seconds here. Yeah. Take that all the way out, and we'll mix it back up in the context of the full song.
You say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the figure. Now you're saying you're proud, yeah, you say. Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying.
We had a
that you're
lot more
stable.
depth and dimension of those drums. So let's go ahead and I'll just grab both of these here and I'll mute them. And notice how when they're muted, the drums just feel smaller, like they're not in as big and realistic of a space. There's not much depth to them.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable.
We solo just the drums to hear this together. Yeah, I think it adds a nice level of depth, but it's not getting in the way of it feeling really upfront present. And that's a trick by triggering this just from the overhead, snare bottom, and room. You're not going to create basically a more distant sound with your direct sources. Again, if you haven't seen my Make Logic Drum Sound Reel series, I'll link to it above here. That's one of the tricks that we use in that. Okay, so that's going to be our drum sound. Let's go ahead and go down to these guitars here. And I just want to put all of these guitars into one space that feels realistic. So I'm going to go to sends from the guitar bus. I've selected this entire track stack here, and I'm sending from this track stack. We're going to go down to bus 5. And again, that's going to create a new bus over here for us. We're going to call this guitar room. And here, I want a fairly small room, something a second or less most likely, but we'll listen to it in the context. I also will often end up using spring reverbs for this. I just like the way spring reverbs sound on guitars. So we'll go over here to guitar. We'll go and create track. That's going to put it over here next to the guitars here. And then on this, we're again just going to go down to Space Designer. And I'm going to show you a little trick. Before the Space Designer, I want to go down to Imaging and pull up the Direction Mixer. And I just want to flip this to be 180 degrees, which is going to flip the left and the right, so that if you hear the guitar amp on the left side, you're hearing the room reverb on the other side. So it's like you hear the amp on one side and then you hear it bouncing off the wall on the other side. I'll show you that in just a second. So now that we have that set up, let's go and pick some room here. Again, let's start with a small space. And there's several in here that I've used. I kind of like this recording stage and this realistic room. I think are both really nice for this purpose. Let's start with the realistic room. And let's just dial it up. We'll go back to our guitars here. And we're just going to send 100%. If I mute that. Instead of lying that you're stable. What I'm going to do here is just blend this back up in now. You say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the figure. Go back to the start of that. Instead of crying at the table. Take that away. Instead of giving out the names. You listen to this in solo. If I just solo one of these guitars here, you hear the guitar in the left ear, and then you hear the reverb in the right ear because I flipped it with that direction mixer before the reverb. I actually think I really like the sound of this, so I think that's a good starting point. Instead of crying at the table. I might tweak it a little bit more, but for sake of time, I think that's a good starting point for us with the reverb here on this guitar. Now, real quick, if you're liking this video so far and you think it would be helpful to someone else, could you be sure to like the video so that YouTube knows to show it to other people? It makes a big difference. Okay, let's go and get back into it. So let's go and get into, you know what? I'm going to send these keys to it too. I think that might be helpful. So we're going to go ahead and just hit Command Shift and D to put all these into a summing stack. And we're going to send these, we're going to call these keys. We're going to send all of these also to that same guitar room, but a lesser mix. I don't want as much of it on there. So instead of sending full, I'm holding Option to just send all of it. I'm just going to dial it up while listening to it in the context of the mix. Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you yeah, that's helping add just a little bit more depth and dimension to those digital elements that I think is really nice. And I ended up with nearly a full send. Again, if I mute that guitar room, instead of pushing it away. It's a subtle change, but it's just a little bit more of a 3D element that goes away. Again, you don't want these to be transformative. You kind of want them to be tucked, at least in my opinion. Best effects are felt, not heard. You don't want them to be too extreme, but you get them up to where you're hearing them, dial them back a little bit, and you're likely living in a really good area. Okay, so let's go and focus now on this lead vocal. We're going to use a couple of effects on here because we really want this to be the center point of the song. So the first thing I do on more or less all my vocals is a stereo slapback delay that's kind of muffled. That's going to add a lot of fullness and warmth here. So we're just going to do a full send. We're going to call this stereo slapback. And I'm going to come on here and do a stereo delay. And I've created a preset because I end up using more or less these same settings every time. I'll turn off tempo sync and I end up having something like 52 milliseconds and 57 milliseconds. So this is a really, really fast slapback delay. And then I've done a low cut to 410 and cut all the way down to 3700. So I'm cutting out all the highs and the lows from this. So it's a really mid-range focus on both the left and the right side. Slightly different on the left and the right side just for a little bit of difference here. And then we have no feedback, no cross right to left, and then 100% mix. So if we listen to this in solo here, instead of crying at the table, it just sounds like a slightly wide vocal. And then what we can do is mix that in with the lead vocal, and we're going to get a nice wide feeling lead vocal sound. Instead of crying at the table, take that back. We're just going to blend it up till we hear it and then dial it back. Instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. You say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the figure. Now you're saying. So notice when I mute this that the vocal just feels a little bit thinner, a little bit lonely. And as soon as I unmute it, that the vocal feels a little bit wider and a little bit fuller, even though it's not really an obvious effect.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away.
Yeah, so that's definitely helping a lot. Okay, we're going to send another effect here for the vocal. We're going to send this to bus 13. And then we're going to call this a slapback delay. This is just going to be a mono slapback delay. So we're going to go down to tape delay. It's in stereo right now. If I flip this here to the mono signal, then it will automatically put it to mono. That just means that it's only going to be in the center. And we're going to call this slap. And then I want this one to be a fair amount brighter. We're going to turn off the tempo sync. And we're just going to make it somewhere around 70 to 120-ish milliseconds, somewhere in that range. We'll listen to it with the vocal to find the exact timing. And I'll turn the wet up just a little bit higher to around 50. We're going to start with it being full brightness, but I might scale that back in a second. So we have the vocal here.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names,
Reduce the feedback just a little bit. So many times it repeats.
instead of pushing it away.
Speed up just a little bit.
It's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the figure. Now you're saying you're proud, yeah, you're saying you're proud. All getting sick of it.
Thinning it out, making it a little less full in the low, mid, low end range.
Instead of crying at the table,
And then again, we're just going to bring this all the way down and mix it back up.
instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. You say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the figure. Now you're saying you're proud.
And then I'm actually going to distort it a little bit. So we're going to go in here to distortion. And I think just this regular distortion will work for me. Let's listen to this in solo.
Instead of crying at the table,
Yeah, I kind of like that right off the bat.
instead of giving out the names,
Maybe bring the tone up just a little bit.
instead of lying that you're stable,
That's just cutting out, or cutting less of the high end.
away. And you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the thick of it. And now you're saying you're proud,
And I'm gonna cut a
yeah,
little
you're
bit more in the low
saying
end.
You're proud. We're all getting sick of it, yeah. Instead of crying at the table,
Cool. In the context here,
instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away.
let's get that back just a
You
little
say it's
bit.
just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the thick. Instead of crying at the table,
Cool.
instead of giving out the names,
If I take away both those sends,
instead of crying at the table,
add them back in.
instead of giving out the names.
Just creating a little bit of space around the vocal. So I'm not even using reverb yet on this vocal. I do think I will send to a reverb. I think I'd like a little bit of kind of a medium to long, probably plate reverb. Let's go ahead and try that. Title this plate. And we'll send a full amount here. We'll start with the space designer. And I'm going to go down to medium spaces, plate reverbs. And let's try the soft plate to start.
Instead of crying at the table,
Way too bright for me. Let's try drum plate. You never know.
instead of crying at the table,
That's kind of neat
instead
sounding.
of giving out the names,
I like the sound of that.
instead of lying that you're stable, instead
Let's
of pushing
try
it away.
a slightly longer one
You
because
say
there's
it's
a
just
fair
to
amount of
get out.
space after the phrases that we have to play with for this to fill in those gaps. So let's try a large space. And let's try this 2.6 vocal plate.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names,
I don't dislike it. Let's try the
instead of
next
lying
one.
that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. And you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out
Cool. Okay, I'm digging that, I think. I like the length of that, but I want to cut a little bit of the high end. So I'm going to put an EQ before this, just the channel EQ, and we're just going to cut a little bit of the high end.
Instead of crying at the table,
And then just a
instead
little
of
bit of
giving
the
out
low
the
end,
names,
so it doesn't get kind of muddy down there.
instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. And you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the thick of it. And now you're saying you're proud, yeah, you're saying you're proud.
Cool. Okay. I'm liking that. It's giving us a nice length. Let's listen in the context of the mix, though, and see what we think of it.
Instead of crying at the table,
Obviously too
instead of
loud.
giving out the names,
Okay, let's try blending it up in now.
instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. And you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the thick of it.
One more time from the top.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying.
I think I want to get crazy here. I think I actually want to throw a delay before this, and I want to have a quarter note delay that's running into this. So let's actually go and do that. Let's go down to delay. We'll just do a stereo delay here. But we're just going to set it to quarter note and then quarter note on the right side as well. And we'll just set a very, very slight offset so that it has a little bit of stereo width to it. And then cut out the high end here on this. And we're going to set this left and right mix to be lower because I want to have the original vocal cut through hit that reverb and then the delay hit the reverb.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing
try
it away.
Maybe
You
a
say
quarter
it's just
note
to
or a
get
half
out,
note.
yeah, it's just to get out of the thick of it. And now you're saying you're proud, yeah, you're saying you're proud. We're all getting sick of it, yeah. Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. And you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out.
And then let's dial the dry in a little bit on this reverb.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names,
So let's actually make this delay 100%, I think.
instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. And you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the thick of it. And now you're saying you're proud, yeah, you're saying you're proud. We're all getting sick of it, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Took me a second, but I finally got the vision. I needed to reduce the amount of reverb wet mix to get it to sound the way I wanted to with a fairly dry delay. And then
Instead of crying at the table,
the
instead
reverb
of
really
giving out the
kicking in.
names,
So then it's really just going to fill in those
instead of lying that
spaces.
you're stable, instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable.
And I think I might actually switch this stereo delay to be 8th note in the left ear.
Instead of crying at the table,
And then it kind of has a bit of a
instead of
ping pong
giving out the
thing.
names,
I'll set the deviation to 0.
instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away, instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away. You say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out of the thick of it.
Cool. Okay. I'm definitely digging that. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. And then I'm going to keep these initial like double and backing vocals totally dry.
Get out. You say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out.
And then the last thing we have is our big chorus vocals that come in right here. And I want these to hit a very prominent time delay and then a even longer plate reverb, I believe. So we're going to go ahead and send off to 2 new sends for these, just from the entire chorus vox bus. And we'll title this timed delay. And we'll make this, again, just a stereo delay here. Back to the start of that. I think just 8th note. Cut a little bit of the high end out. And we'll blend it up in here. Cool. Dig it. I'm going to dial up the feedback just a little bit. Cool. It's short, but it's helping fill in some of the space, give these vocals a little bit more of a tucked in feel as opposed to sitting on top of the mix. And then we're going to create one more send, and this is just going to be a super long plate reverb here. Actually, I might go with a room reverb just so it's a little less bright. So we'll say long room. Be sure to title your effects so you know what you're sending to. And it makes it easy then too. I can just, under my buses, see exactly which ones I'm sending off to. So we'll go here. I'm going to do Space Designer yet again. And we're just going to pull up a large space under halls. Let's try smooth vocal hard to start. I don't know if that'll be long enough for me though. I'm digging it, so that's a good option, but let's see. I was thinking something more around 4 seconds. I feel like that one's getting a little bit too long here. Let's try Warm Hall. That's starting to feel better to me. Let's go ahead and try to blend it in and see if we like it or if we need to do any EQ work on it. Cool, I'm digging it. Let's listen to this one more time. Just listening to that tail there. Yeah, I think I like the tone of that on those vocals. Okay, so let's take a second here. We're going to start back in this verse, and I want to just compare with level set appropriately, which we've done in the static mix. Then we did master track processing, then EQ and compression, and now just reverb and delay, and compare that back to our static mix, which basically is just our level set, and then it's also hitting the master track processing. So EQ, compression, and effects is what we're going to be hearing the difference of. And notice how it changes the mix. I haven't done this comparison yet, so let's see how it changes it.
Instead of crying at the table, instead of giving out the names, instead of lying that you're stable, instead of pushing it away, and you say it's just to get out, yeah, it's just to get out, out of the thick of it.
Clearer, a little bit more three-dimensional depth.
Yeah. All getting sick of it. Settle down at all. as young, and you think that you might not settle down at all. Yeah.
Cool.
'Cause baby, we're not on call. Baby, we're not on.
It's coming together. It definitely needs a little bit of tweaking still, but it kind of is like going from a demo to a finished product. It's much more clear. It's less covered up. It has less harsh and nasally frequency. And then the effects have given us this realistic depth to the mix that we just weren't getting before. So not a perfect mix yet. We'll continue to tweak it, but it's definitely much, much closer than that static mix, which again, when we set the static mix, already felt like a decent mix. If you can get a good static mix, then you're just building on top of that and making sure that you like the decisions that you're making as you go. Okay, if you don't already have my 6 checklist to a pro mix, be sure to grab it from the link in the description below. It's really going to help you out. And if this video is helpful for you, be sure to like this video. It makes a big difference in terms of making sure that other people actually see this video. So if you think it will be helpful to them, be sure to like this video. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. Is this how you've handled effects before in your mixes, or how have you done it differently? And are you going to try this out in your next mix? Let me know in the comments below. If this video was helpful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. We're going to finish up this mix with a little bit of automation.